This is the Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew, the 4th chapter. Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished. The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, 'One does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God.' Then the devil took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, 'If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, He will command His angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up so that you will not dash your foot against a stone.' Jesus said to him, 'Again it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test.' Again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And he said to him, 'All these I will give you if you fall down and worship me.' Jesus said to him, 'Away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him.' Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him." This is the gospel of the Lord. And you may be seated. So today is a special Sunday. I get to wear a t-shirt while I'm preaching, so I'm pretty excited about that. And it's going to be 54 degrees outside. But it's also a very special day. I'm wearing a t-shirt for a specific reason, because today is Mission Jamaica Sunday. Last time I talked about Jamaica and our trip, I was the only one that had come back. Everybody else was sleeping because we got back very late that night. So I wanted to provide an opportunity for the other Mission Jamaica participants to share a little bit. They're all rested up after our trip and ready to go. So we're going to look forward to hearing from them, a few of them, in just a moment here. But first I wanted to show a picture of who went. So let's see. In Jamaica, one of the tasks that we did is we built a house, as well as we worked at an orphanage, and we worked at a boys' home as well. So this is our group at the house after the house was finished. And I wanted our Mission Jamaica participants to stand up, please, if you could. And a lot of them are wearing their t-shirts or hats. So I'm just going to share the names of everybody who went. Marlis Montgomery, Chuck and Eileen Struckman, Rod and Kathy Schrader, Jo Marie Fike, Deanne Hansen, Gail Holland, Diane Westlake, myself, Aaron, and my wife went as well, Mary, Shelley Jansen, Angelique Goulet, that was a participant from Mary's Church over at Good Shepherd, and then Cassie Huseman as well, another participant from Good Shepherd. You can all have a seat now. But we had an excellent time in Jamaica, and I forgot to put a map up, include a map in the pictures. So I'm going to do my best to use my hand as a map. Jamaica actually looks a lot like a hand, like the palm of a hand, and it's directly south of Florida and Cuba, about 100 miles south of Cuba. And we were in Montego Bay, which would be right here, right about my thumb, would be Montego Bay. And we spent a week there. It was the third week in January, and we've shared a little bit about this, but I'll share again. We spent the week at a Holiday Inn resort. That's where we stayed. And then the first 4 days, we went out on different mission excursions, you might call them. We worked at a boys' home, Clifton Boys' Home. We also worked at an orphanage for people with disabilities, and then also built that house as well that you all raised money for. And so those were the first 4 days, Sunday through Wednesday. Then Thursday and Friday were kind of fun days where we could spend some time relaxing and that sort of thing. And then we flew back on Saturday. So it was Saturday to Saturday, and that's our group there in the house. And this is on one of our fun days here. We have a nice meal at the resort there. And then now this is me preaching wasn't really preaching, but on Sunday we went to a worship service, and Kathy's going to share a little more about that. And it was really cool because people were saying amen and preach it all throughout the service. So please feel free at any time, if you feel so moved, give a amen or preach it, whatever you, or like, come on now, Aaron, come on, you can do it, come on. So please feel free to do any of that. So that's me preaching, just saying hello more or less. So I wanted to reflect on our text in light of our trip. And one of the things that I so appreciate about going on a trip, especially a mission trip, is it reminds me of my identity. It reminds me of who I am and whose I am. And I certainly had that experience on this trip. I thought a lot about my identity as a child of God, and thought about how everywhere we go, we encounter the beloved of God. We encounter God's children. And I was thinking about that whole notion of identity in light of our trip and in light of our text as well. This text is Jesus out in the wilderness being tempted by the devil, and he's tempted on 3 different occasions. And although I think it's very important to actually know what's going on before he goes out into the wilderness to be tempted. And what happens before he goes out in the wilderness is he is baptized by John in the river Jordan. And as he is being baptized, as he's coming up out of the water, this is right before chapter 4, in chapter 3, verse 17. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." This is my Son, the beloved. Here Jesus is given his identity. This is my Son, the beloved. Jesus is the beloved. And all of us, the daughters and sons of God, all of us are the beloved as well. And I was reminded of that when we went down to Jamaica. We encountered God's beloved down in Jamaica, and were able to serve them and be with them as a fellow beloved member of the body of Christ. So then Jesus goes out into the wilderness, and the devil tempts this identity, tempts Jesus to stray away from this identity of being the beloved of God. And so the first temptation that the devil offers to Jesus is he tells him to command the stones to become loaves of bread. But Jesus answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." So he tempts Jesus to believe that we are what we do. The world tells us we are what we do. And so he tells Jesus to change these stones into loaves of bread, to believe that you are what you do, and to get away from that identity of being a beloved child of God. And so then the second thing that he tempts him with is he tells him to go up to a pinnacle of a temple and then throw himself down. He says, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down and you will be saved." Well, just imagine if he threw himself down from the pinnacle of this temple. Imagine how the word would spread and people would say all of these marvelous things about him. He tempts him to stray away from his identity of a beloved child of God, and to believe, as the world says, that our identity comes from what others say about us. What others say about us. That's not true. That's not our true identity. Our true identity is that we are the beloved of God. And then lastly, the devil once again tempts Jesus, and he takes him to a high mountain and shows him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor, and he says to him, "All these I will give you if you fall down and worship me." So he promised him all of these wonderful possessions, the kingdoms of the world. He tempts him with what the world would say in terms of our identity. You are what you have. And Jesus says no. Jesus says no. We are the beloved of God. So that is our identity. We are the beloved of God. We are not what we do. We are not what others say about us. We are not what we have. We are the beloved of God. And I was reminded of that time and time again on our trip to Jamaica as we encountered the beloved daughters and sons of God in Jamaica. I think that's a really important thing to remember as the world tempts us with these other ways of determining our identity, that we are what we do, what others say about us, we are what we have. All of those things are a bunch of lies. We are the beloved of God, the beloved daughters and sons of God. Please, please believe that. That is who we are. And so now I'd like to invite Kathy to come up, and she's going to share a little bit about our trip and share about a beloved daughter of God as well, named Trudy. So take it away. Now, I just want to say, Kathy always said she would never preach a sermon. This is the second time that I've gotten her to preach. So there you go. So thank you, Kathy. Just come down like that. Yep, there you go.
Okay. I'm Kathy Schrader. My husband Rod and many special, hardworking friends from Christ the King and Good Shepherd went on a trip to Jamaica, a mission trip. But first of all, I want to thank Pastor Aaron and his lovely wife, Pastor Mary. She's from the other church.
She is.
We kidded around all through our time there, talking about what church is the best.
Right.
But anyway, we just want to thank you for guiding and inspiring us all through our whole trip. You two were wonderful. You just made us feel so comfortable in a different country. So thank you for that. Well, Saturday afternoon, we dressed up for church and had breakfast and left at 7:30 in the morning, bus style, on a rugged, winding road that went up, to West Haven Orphanage. It took 45 minutes to an hour. And when we arrived, the kids come running to the bus, some of them that could walk. And they were so excited to see all of us. And they'd grab our hands and they'd hug us. And then Jeff and his wife Paige showed us around the orphanage. But the big highlight of the day was when we took some children from the orphanage to the church for services. A few walked. Pastor Aaron took someone in a wheelchair, and some of them took a bus. But wow, was that a church service? Sorry, Pastor Aaron. Everyone dressed up, men in suits, women in fancy dresses, and beautiful hats. It was very uplifting. When the music started, everyone swayed and danced and sang. Of course, it took a couple of songs to get a few of us Norwegians going, but we made it. Trudy, a meek girl from the orphanage, came and sat by me. She looked around 9 or 10 years old, but she was a lot older. She had grayed around the temples like I have. But she always had a frown on her face. And she sat down beside me and grabbed my hand. And when the music started playing, we got up and we swayed and danced and had a good time. I looked down at her and she was smiling. And I had never seen her smile before, and I probably never saw her smile again. Because after the music stopped, she had her big frown on her face. These children were wonderful. They needed a lot of love and caring. I know Diane Westlake had told me about Chris. There was a boy sitting in front of her, and he just kept time to the music the whole time. But these children are wonderful, but they needed a lot of love and caring. And it was really hard to leave at the end of the week because there was so much more that had to be done. And I'm sure I can speak for everyone. I am so glad we all went, and we all had a good time, Everyone was having a good time and worked real hard. But it was very, very rewarding. Chuck?
Hallelujah! Hey, nice. Hallelujah! That's good. Very good. Was that oak? How about that, Kathy? I've never gotten that before. Hallelujah. And so here are a few more residents from West Haven Orphanage at the church. We had to push them up this big slippery ramp. I just about lost it a couple of times on that ramp. All right, so these are the three wise men right here. You might call, they said they were three wise guys, but I would say wise men. So at this time, I'd like to invite the center wise man to come forward, Chuck, to offer a story. And he's got a story about this gal.
Hey, you're right. The view up here is pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, not bad. Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. I want to thank Pastor Aaron and his wife, Pastor Mary, for being a host on this trip, getting us where we had to be, making sure that we were on the van and we weren't wandering off someplace. So thank you. I appreciate that. The first day that I was there, I worked at a orphanage, West Haven Orphanage, for some very severely handicapped young people, some not so severely handicapped. But my job, along with Rod Schroeder, was to scrape some paint off the railings, metal railings, getting them ready to paint. And it was hard work, and yet we took a lot of breaks. It was really hot. We would go sit at a bench or a picnic table with a top on it so that we had some shade. And about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the first day, a beautiful young lady, about 10, maybe 11, 12 years old, walked up to us and just kind of stood there and looked at us. And finally I said to her, to break the ice, I said, "You know how to wink?" And she looked at me kind of funny like, and she didn't do anything. And I said to her, I said, "You know how to wink. You got to go like this and in the other eye." And she didn't do a thing. Finally, one more time, I said, "Do you know how to wink?" And she winked with both eyes closed. And I looked at her and I said, "No, honey," I said, "one eye at a time." And finally she did, one eye at a time, and left. And that afternoon, I don't know, maybe about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Rod and I were taking another break, and she came with Deanne Hanson, and they were doing some painting and stuff, whatever, with a magic marker. And all of a sudden she grabbed a hold of my hand and wrote her name on my arm. And to this day, Deanne, I don't know what her name was. You told me, but I can't remember. But anyway, then she handed the magic marker to me, and I had to write on her arm. And a little while later, I was sitting there with Rod, and I took my cap off because it was kind of warm. And all of a sudden, she's behind us, rubbing my head. But that wasn't all, because I don't have much hair. She grabbed a hold of Rod's cap and took his off. He's got a lot more hair than I do. So she had a good time. So anyway, the next day, we were back up to the orphanage and doing some painting. And I didn't see her until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And she walked up to me and she looked at me and she said, "Wink," and closed her eye. Now, she'd never talked before this. She talked to Deanne, but she never said anything to Rod and I. So as the day ended, I started to walk down to where our van was parked, which was quite a ways down the orphanage. And all of a sudden, she came up and grabbed my hand. And we walked down together. And you'll have to excuse me, I guess. And I went into the van and sat there. And she stood there for a while. And I could see her standing there. And all of a sudden, she winked at me and waved and walked away. The third day, I knew I couldn't go back to the orphanage for other reasons, I guess. I went and helped them build a house. When Eileen came home a couple months ago or so and said, we're going to Jamaica, I had my doubts. I didn't really know what to expect, but thank you, babe.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Appreciate that. I love that story. That's just an awesome story. I've got a few other pictures I'd like to share with you here. Chuck, do you have those pictures? We need to get you those pictures of. Do you have the pictures of her writing on your arm? We'll have to get those to you. Yeah. And this is Shelley here. She's doing some tiling work, so she became an expert tiler. This is at West Haven. And one of the sad things that happened while we were there, this happened on the Sunday. So again, we worked at the 3 different sites, the home and then West Haven, which Chuck was talking about, and then also the Clifton Boys Home. And we had a group that went up there Sunday afternoon, the first Sunday that we were there. And then they got back, and then later that night we had heard, got a phone call that the Clifton Boys Home burned down to the ground. It's a boys' home for about, I think, 20 boys or so, 20 or 30 boys, led by an amazing woman named Miss Mack, who does a phenomenal job. And one of the things that we're going to be doing today is we've got a couple of offering plates at the doors. So if you feel so moved, would like to donate towards the reconstruction of the boys' home, the offering plates will be there for you. And this will be kind of a long process, probably the next year or even 2 years before they're able to rebuild the home. But I have just a few pictures from the boys' home. This is what it looked like after it burned down. And just a couple of shots there and there again. And here are some of the boys. Actually, I think this is at West Haven here. Just some faces of some of the residents, some of the beloved children of God. And then this is at the boys' home wearing sunglasses. And then what they did is they put them up in a church, and so that's where they've been staying at a church, and so they'll be together for a while in this church. And I think they might have relocated them to a different facility. But they're just sleeping on the floor, so they don't have much, but they're taking care of them and getting them meals and sheets and everything like that. Yeah, Theo. That I don't know. It could very well be. Yeah, but they'll be involved in some way. Yeah. Yep. Thanks for asking. Some of the other boys there from the boys' home. Oh. Yeah, it is. So that's at the boys' home there with Gail and Angelique far to the right there. And Diane, that's at West Haven, one of the residents there. And that's at West Haven as well, just some scenes from the trip. And then we also had time to have fun. This was the Glistening Waters. So it's one of the few places in the world where the water glows in the dark when you move it because of some living organism. And so you can see the wake is lit up in the back there from these organisms. I did 10 cannonballs on off the boat. So that was my fun that I did. So, well, this is our trip in a nutshell. There's so many different stories, so many different things to share with you about. But it's not only the 11 that went down from this church, but all of you went down in some way. We represented all of you, and so we give thanks for that opportunity to do that. And the fact that we were able to raise money for the home as well that I've talked about in the past a few weeks ago. That's truly a remarkable thing that we provided a home for a woman down in Jamaica. So that's a pretty neat thing too. So not only are we working to take care of God's beloved here locally, but also globally as well. And it's a pretty awesome thing as you think about all of God's beloved throughout the world, all of God's creation. So let's keep reaching out and loving and caring for one another, and remembering that we are not what we do, we are not what others say about us, and we are not what we have. We are the beloved daughters and sons of God, and this is good news.